Now, few voices command as much respect on questions of governance, institutions, and economic direction as the president of ANAP Foundation and founder of Stanbic IBTC, Atedo Peterside CON. At moments like this, when the political ground is shifting, his assessment doesn't just inform the debate, it often helps to shape it. The Supreme Court has now, of course, delivered consequential rulings on two of Nigeria's major opposition parties, the PDP and the ADC, decisions that have raised fresh questions about the readiness of the opposition ahead of 2027. In 2023, Mr. Peterside's ANAP Foundation backed polling that correctly signposted a three-horse race long before the ballots were cast. Well, now the political chessboard being rearranged, what do these rulings really mean for the opposition, who, in his assessment, is truly in contention for 2027? Is Nigeria heading towards a one-horse race, a two-horse contest, or something more competitive? And beyond politics, there's the economy, with tensions in the Middle East intensifying, including the standoff around the Strait of Hormuz and global energy markets on edge. What does this mean for Nigeria? Well, let's put all that to my first guest on the program tonight, Mr. Atedo Peterside, CON, president of ANAP Foundation and founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank, who joins me from our studios in Lagos. Mr. Peterside, first of all, my apologies for the delay. I know you got there well ahead of time, and the communications let us down. So my sincere apologies. Thank you very much indeed for your patience. Now, you've said that democracy rests on credible elections and a trusted judiciary, based on what we've seen from the Supreme Court in the last day. Are those pillars being strengthened or strained? Do these rulings bring clarity? Let's start with the ADC.
Hi, Charles. I heard about the Supreme Court ruling, but with all due respect, I don't trust our judiciary. I'm not a lawyer. Supreme Court has said, if I understand what they ruled in the interim, David Mark can continue, but the substantive suit goes back to the High Court or wherever, and who knows what's going to happen down the road. All I can tell you is that only some Nigerians get prompt hearing from our judiciary. The rest of us, including you and I, if we brought a similar case as the fellow from ADC that came to court, you'll be lucky to get a hearing in even 6 months. My father had a case in the judiciary. It took 23 years to be resolved from the High Court to the Supreme Court. The only people that go around courts getting quick hearing, getting all kinds of attention, are people who generally are either gaming the system. I've heard, and please, I rely on what judges say. I've heard judges like ex-Supreme Court judge like, Amina Ogi, to tell you about how registrars and all those people decide who gets their case to get heard and all that. An ordinary Nigerian cannot go to court and get a quick hearing on a matter like this. Only people who are highly privileged or sponsored by the powers that be get all this attention and quick response. So let's put that matter aside.
Well, that's a fairly depressing picture you've painted there, but I suspect that many people will agree with what you've said. But just going beyond that, looking ahead, now that the ADC appears to have got, and I emphasize the word appears to have got a second wind, looking ahead, who do you realistically see emerging from the ADC primaries or consensus or whatever they decide as its presidential candidate? And more importantly, does that person have national viability?
Okay, I think one thing that INEC has done for the ADC, Nigerians historically have a bit of a David and Goliath mentality. When they see an INEC or a federal government agencies appearing to bully one of the opposition parties, it increases their sympathy for that opposition party. The worst thing that APC or INEC could have done to ADC was to ignore them. Then they would have been struggling to tell the nation that they're the most credible opposition party. But by going after them in this way, you make everybody believe that there's something about the ADC that warrants all this attention. Americans often say, I have friends in America in public relations, they say, any kind of PR is good PR. If every day the headline stories about ADC, this ADC in the court, it creates an impression that there's something about ADC. If they ignore them, Nigerians will be debating which is the most credible opposition party. But by focusing so much on the ADC, they're indirectly telling us that there's something about the ADC that we need to watch out about. And by coincidence, the last election, the candidates for the presidency that polled second, third, and fourth, Atiku, Peter Obi, Kwankwaso, they're all in the ADC. So perhaps there's something about the ADC that worries INEC or worries the federal government or worries APC, I don't know. But they are the ones drawing attention to ADC every day. And I think it's a mistake on their part.
I think that's an interesting analysis. I'm going to return to the ADC briefly in a moment, but just turning to the other main opposition party, the PDP, after this ruling, is it your sense that the PDP is stabilizing or sliding further into uncertainty?
No, as soon as the major presidential candidates from the last election who were in opposition, Atiku, Peter Obi, Kwankwaso, all gathered and joined one party, that party became the major opposition party. So I think PDP, with Atiku having left the party, not Amechi, but so many others like David Mark leaving the party, PDP, forget about what any court says. PDP is no longer the PDP of the past. Whatever PDP had has probably transmutated into ADC. That's my own ruling. That's my own estimation.
Right. Well, that's an interesting assessment. And looking at the opposition as a whole, including the Labour Party, as well as the SDP, which you left a few months ago, then the APC, the ADC, and the PDP, who, in your assessment, is in the running with a good shot in the 2027 presidential election? Who is genuinely competitive heading into 2027?
Well, I think I gave a hint already. If I'm a betting man, I would say it's a two-horse race between APC and ADC. That is, if INEC and the courts would allow ADC to run. But even if they don't allow them to run, then we have a major problem or a major crisis on our hands. But I think everybody knows that the major opposition party is the ADC. And by the way, that's partly why I left SDP. I was in SDP trying to make SDP a major political party. But as soon as negotiations fell apart and it became clear that SDP was not going to be the major opposition party, I had no business there any longer. So ADC is the party that people who believe in opposition have decided to coalesce into.
Well, that sounds like, if I might widen the lens a little, that it sounds like you have faith in that there is a two-party system, because I'm wondering whether, based on everything you're seeing, Nigeria is drifting towards a de facto one-party state, or is that an exaggeration based on your own assessment?
I think if this government and INEC make the mistake of going into a general election with only one major party, I don't want to predict what will happen to the nation, but all bets are off in terms of stability. That's my assessment. So I would advise whoever has ears to listen. And I keep going back. People keep on telling me, why am I always quoting JFK? If you want stability in a political system, you have to give a semblance, make people believe that some change is possible, that you're willing to allow some contest, a meaningful contest. Once you make it clear that for whatever reason or through whatever manipulation of the system, you won't allow that, then all bets are off. You know, we've seen it before. We saw when Abacha created an environment where he was heading to be the sole candidate. You know, those things can't endure, they won't endure. So I hope whoever has ears is listening.
Well, just drilling down further with that sort of trend of thought, in 2023, your ANAP Foundation backed polling that correctly anticipated a 3-horse race well before sort of the ballots took place. What does your current reading suggest? 1 horse, I think you said 2-horse race, and or a more competitive field.
I think this time round, if INEC would allow an opposition party the opposition to take part in these elections, you will probably have a 2-horse race between APC and ADC. In the case, I'm not saying anything profound. The 3 candidates that came second, third, and fourth last time for presidency are all in ADC. In fact, what APC has done for them and INEC is to help them to coalesce and come together. Because when you attack a new group, you force them to unify. If you left them alone, they'll probably start dividing themselves sooner or later. You know, and also, even if you look at the numbers, I think go and check ADC registration. Many more people rushed to register to join ADC after INEC began to harass them.
Right. I think we might have a slide of that because I think that's quite an interesting snapshot of what is going on at the moment. Do we have that slide? Yeah. Okay, that is I don't know if you can see it from there. Can you see it from there, Mr. Peters?
I know what the figures. It's not very legible, but I know what the figures show. I mean, I got this from the ADC. The last time I checked their registrations, the number 1 state in terms of registrations was Kaduna State. That's probably the Nasir El-Rufai influence. Again, another mistake. When you lock up people unjustly for so long, refuse to grant them bail, you give them, they get sympathy, and their supporters get mobilized and start, registering and getting interested. So the last figures I saw had Kaduna, Kano, Adamawa, and at the top. An interesting thing is that the states in the south, in the northwest, and the northeast were those with the largest number of people who have registered. Lagos was, I think, all the way down to number 20 or something like that. And so if you look at that trend, it's like the people in northwest and northeast are the most politically active in the opposition so far. Of course, all this can change, and it's a bit of a surprise. It's a bit of a surprise because ADC actually allows online registration. And online registration is very easy for those who are literate. So you would have thought that the people who are highly literate would register online from their homes or from their phones. But it's not happening that way. Instead, it is the states that are not so sophisticated in terms of technology and all that who are registering the most. So it's like people are being mobilized and are coming out to register in all those states in the northwest and the northeast. Of course, Kano is probably the influence of Kwankwanso, who joined ADC recently. So that's building up as well.
Well, I mean, based on the
Lagos is number 20.
Right. But based on the registration details that we're seeing there, I mean, we're not really seeing, I mean, you're talking about the influence of people like Atiku in Adamawa, I mean, Kwankwaso in Kano, but we're not seeing the influence of Obi in the South, are we? In the Southeast?
Yes, I don't see the influence of Peter Obi. You know, that's one of these things in Nigeria that people say, oh, I said you cannot register online. The obedience are educated, sophisticated, but they're not taking part. They're not registering in ADC. I don't know whether Peter Obi has reached out to them to register or whether they're waiting for the last minute. Because people who are educated sometimes get so clever, they want to wait for the very last minute. They want to hear what Supreme Court has said. But so far it's not showing. So if I was a betting man and these numbers remain the way they are, it looks as if the ADC has a very strong northern influence and not so strong in the south so far. Of course, at the last minute, people can register if 5 million youths decide to register in the last 1 week from the southeast or from Lagos and the southeast. Of course, that changes everything.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And your reading of it as well. But let's turn to, because I mean, we're fast running out of time, which is unfortunate. We lost 10 minutes at the beginning. But let's turn to the global picture, the tensions involving the US, Israel, Iran, the risks around the Strait of Hormuz. What does this mean in real terms for Nigeria's economy? You're fiddling with your microphone there. I'm getting a little bit nervous. But what does this mean in real terms for Nigeria's economy? Is Nigeria positioned to benefit from higher oil prices or exposed to the downside risks?
I don't think that Nigeria is going to enjoy a phenomenal windfall from higher oil prices, because I keep on hearing that a good chunk of our oil was sold forward in all kinds of arrangements involving NNPC. So it's the party that bought the oil forward who benefits from the upside. Of course, if the high prices stay for a very long period, then we get the benefits. And even if it stays for a short period, we get the benefit from the portion of the oil that is sold spot and not and that was not contracted forward. But sadly, the biggest shocks we got immediately, of course, was increase in domestic fuel prices. And I think the most dramatic or the most alarming was aviation fuel. You know, in the US, go and check it out. Petrol prices went up, let's say 40-45%. In Nigeria, aviation fuel prices between end of February, which was the last day of February when the war began, take it to end of March. In Abuja, we're talking about increase of over 150% aviation fuel prices. Now, I know people are always surprised that why is aviation fuel so special? It's a very simple reason. Aviation fuel is almost a natural monopoly or an oligopoly. You have to buy fuel from the people that have the facilities at the airport, and they are always very few. So so they can take advantage. Also, the person supplying them can take advantage of the situation. And when they tell you it's 100%, 150%, what do? You cannot carry your plane to the market to go and buy fuel somewhere else. You have to buy from them. And also, we don't have a regulator, or it looks as if we didn't have a regulator in the system. And so that's why the price shock for the aviation sector has been phenomenal. That's one negative. The other thing, of course, is that even diesel prices, petrol prices have gone up. So many companies are going to witness rising costs. So in the very short term, I don't see any benefits accruing to Nigeria from this war in Iran. If anything, it's rising costs for various businesses on account of the war.
Right.
And
of course, coming from you,
nothing to celebrate or rejoice about.
Well, I mean, coming from you are a sort of respected sort of economist, business person. So the points you make are sort of worth hearkening to. And now that we are talking about the subject of the economy, I mean, well, what's your reaction to the sacking of the finance minister, Wale Edun, which the president has insisted is a resignation, but others say he was sacked. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, it was the same authorities that told us he was sacked, that told us that he resigned. I think probably it's a bit of both, because usually ministers don't resign until the boss agrees to let them go. So one thing is sure, he has gone. But I think more importantly, the decision to say it was a resignation is a good one for the government, because the coordinating minister of the economy is a very important position. You cannot in one breath say everything is going fine with the economy and then you're sacking the coordinating minister. Then people start saying, but if everything is going fine, why are you sacking the coordinating minister? So I think somewhere down the line, somebody decided that let's accept a resignation letter and let's move on. But in any case, the problem with the economy is that there's a severe fiscal imbalance. We don't have the revenues that we have been projecting so far. And that's the reason why the capex for the budgets is seriously underfunded. In the meantime, we were racing ahead with massive projects like the Lagos-Calabar project, Calabar Coastal Road, that was never properly debated or discussed by anybody. So there's a revenue shortage. And if you insist on spending the way this federal government has been spending, and you don't have the revenue, there are only three things you can do. One, you either go and raise the revenue somehow, which they failed to do so far. Two, you borrow money. Or three, you print money. There's no fourth way. I think after the experience of the last government, when the Central Bank Governor Emefiele under Buhari was printing naira like a drunken sailor, I think everybody decided that printing money is not something we want to do just yet. So Cardoso is not going down that route. So that put the burden of the adjustment in two other areas. You have to raise the revenue from taxation or you borrow money. And I think the reason why the capex was underfunded from several ministries, we heard the health minister cry out that in 2025 you only got 36 million naira. It's because they just didn't raise the revenue. It's a serious crisis there. But apart from the revenue, I don't want to talk about just government. Apart from government not having the revenue, and therefore we are witnessing a fiscal imbalance or fiscal crisis, the bigger thing is the number of people being thrown into poverty. It's increasing all the time. And we also have an income distribution problem. Because it's not even true that the pain is felt evenly across Nigeria.
So in that regard, what are you, I know you said you didn't want to focus specifically on the government, but I mean, the government has something to do with the reforms that are having an impact on society. So in that regard, do you think the Tinubu administration's economic reforms are still on track, or are there, in your assessment, signals that suggest that they are not? And if so, where does your concern lie? Are you beginning to see signs of drift or inconsistency?
Yes, I think I've already mentioned the fiscal imbalance. If you're not careful, this current year, barring a miracle, we may finish up with a 35 trillion naira deficit or something like that. So the government, from the first day, was going ahead as if, because they removed fuel subsidy, because they had allowed the naira to adopt a realistic exchange rate, they could spend all the money. But that's not really true. They didn't have the money. And it shows. If they had the money, they'd be able to fund all the capex. What people forget is that the way President Buhari's government funded the fuel subsidy was largely by borrowing. So we didn't have the revenue then, we don't have the revenue now. Then a combination of state capture and corruption have made us prioritize, funny projects. That's why health will suffer, and defense, military spending they won't get what they need, because people are prioritizing what seems to be their own pet projects, through the state capture and corruption. And then finally, the impact we see is the distorted income distribution. And please, the income distribution I'm talking about, if you look at the breakdown across the states, you may understand why people who are based in Abuja and who only travel to the southwest may think that things are not so bad. Because the states that have poverty above 60%, there's no southwest state in there. You've got to go to those other parts of the country where poverty is ravaging, millions of people,
right,
to feel the pain. And that's why some of us like traveling. Because if you stay in Lagos or you stay in Abuja, you may get a false sense of, things are not that bad. If you want poverty to hit you in the face, go and visit those states. I think you have a chart out there showing you the top states in terms of poverty. You will see that there's no state in the southwest up there in terms of extreme poverty. It's from around number 24 downwards, or the bottom 20 states in Nigeria,
right,
that poverty is really gripping.
Well, as I said at the outset, we lost a considerable amount of time at the beginning, so we're literally out of time. But I'd like to get your final word on this. We've got about a minute for that. If you had to send one message to policymakers tonight, what would it be, given the intersection of political uncertainty and economic pressure? Briefly.
I would beg them and plead with them that let those at the top live by example. Let them begin the belt tightening right from Aso Rock, right from Abuja, right from the Villa. Let them show that they understand what 130 million Nigerians are going to. They should not exempt themselves from the pain. They should lead by example and stop all this wastage and, reckless. We see people going to the airport and 100 cars in a convoy, or 50 and all that. Who's paying for all that fuel? Why are we sending those kinds of signals at a time when 130 million Nigerians are debt poor? They should tighten their own belt and take it seriously and lead by example.
And on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. And again, apologize for that delay at the beginning. Mr. Atedo Peterside, CON, is president of ANAP Foundation and founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank. And he was talking to me from our studios in Lagos. Thank you very much.